Okay, so what is a Trecena? This is a 13 numbers as a recurring cycle. There are many cycles. I'm starting with the primordial ones. There's days, and then there's the numbers. The days have names. The days have shapes. The days have very extensive descriptors, tendencies, entire lists of things that they contain. But the numbers are really more of well, let's call it a strength of flavoring, like a lemon. If you could have you have a lemon, you might have a lemon that's not ripe. You might have a lemon that's perfectly ripe, and then you could have a lemon that's going bad. Those three lemons are going to taste differently, but it's still a lemon. And that's how the days work with the numbers. The numbers are really just progressions and accentuations of those days. Now, the curious thing, and the thing that is most noticeable about the cycle of the 13 numbers, is that they accentuate the day one most noticeably. So that's the beginning of what we call a Trecena. So in the Trecena of Cot, for instance, it would start 1 Cot, 2 Con, 3 Kame, and so forth, all the way around to the number 13, and it would end on a element that is the same as the beginning of the Trecena, just by synchronization of nature, I suppose, but that's what they do. So each Trecena is not just the flavor of the day it begins on, but also the element that it begins on. And so you're going to see that the next Trecena after Ajmak would be Noj. So the cycle continues this way. And after the Trecena of Noj, then the next Trecena would be Z, and so on and so forth. Now, the Trecenas start and end on the same elements. So here we have lines connecting the beginning and ends of each of the Trecenas of the air day. And there being that there's 5 air days in the set of 20, you end up with this configuration if you have the beginning and ending of each Trecena connected with a line. It's just a simple geometric exercise in a circular calendar, but that's what it is. Now, everybody gets a turn, and that makes 260 days, because 13 and 20 is 260, so that's why it's taught that way. The 13 numbers are the 13 major joints in the human body. That makes it pretty easy to remember. You can count them anytime. Ankles, knees, hips, wrists, elbows, shoulders, and the head is the 13th. So, and the 20 days are the 20 fingers and toes. So nothing could be simpler to teach a child, and it's also very basic scientific knowledge. It's also crucial knowledge to any human being to always understand and know their place and position in their environment. And like I mentioned in the video of what is a day, as it turns out, because these days change every 24 hours, it kind of looks like, that feels like an Earth thing, right? There's no other planet that has a 24-hour revolution, but we do, and that's every day's an Earth day. But these are the different flavors, and those are the different Trecenas. And so, and the 260 days is the approximate period of human gestation. So just some correlations that are interesting and have been long kept as primordial lessons about where you are and what time it is. Now, the Trecena works like a wave, in my opinion. I like to compare it to a wave, the life of a wave. Waves start in the water with wind, right, passing over them, stirs up the top of the water, and then they draw a little bit of water from underneath, and it stirs up and turbulates the surface of the water. I think turbulates is a word. And right about in the middle of the Trecena is this little point where the wave begins to crest, and the tip of it turns into spray, and I like to think of that as the middle of the Trecena. And then the Trecena ends on 13 with the water receding back from the shore, revealing a new changed environment with maybe if you're a beachcomber, you go out once a week, or if you went out once every 13 days, that would be very interesting. But yeah, you might find new things on the beach. Things have changed a little bit. Here's a new piece of wood. What happened over here? Things wash up on the beach, and the look of it changes subtly over time, doesn't it? And that's a very good comparison to the Trecena, in that these Trecenas wash over us like a wave repeatedly, and change our environment in noticeable ways, though small, but accumulatively they change quite a bit, don't they? Just like a beach. So in the Quiche Maya order of the Trecenas, they don't. Now I get differences of opinion on this. Some of the Maya do not keep track of the Trecenas at all, though they definitely acknowledge the numbers. They just don't keep track of the Trecenas. They focus on the numbers. That's fine. That's their prerogative. But they do start the new year with 8 bots, which was the original picture where I started the image of the 13 numbers with the 20 days. And so that would be the order listed here of the Trecenas within that the calendar, the way they keep it. They have their own reasons for that. Can get into that, can elaborate on that more later, but just basically I just want to show that the order of the days is not anything like the order of the Trecenas. If you keep the order of the Trecenas, this is not something that's done at a primordial level. It shows the ability to cognitively process 2 different cycles. So it's not necessarily what I would call something that would occur naturally without having knowledge. Let's put it that way. So if I see something that's set up in the order of the Trecenas, it definitely triggers an alarm that somebody has processed this cognitively and purposely done it. So in Genesis, the book of Genesis, this entire book is written in the order of the Trecenas. Each chapter is a different Trecena, and it starts with Ish. That Ish being the day of Earth Mother, or the Mother of Earth, or the day of woman, so to speak. And the first chapter is the creation of the earth, isn't it? So on and so forth. Kej is the second chapter, and it talks about the 4. Kej is all about the 4 corners, the 4 elements, and then in the book of Kej, it's the 4 heads, the water coming out of 4 heads and going to all the corners of the earth, blah, blah, blah. So on and so forth. Each one follows them so perfectly that it cannot be by accident. Just to let you know, passing along some information here. It's not an accident. That doesn't happen. It takes a very decent working knowledge of the Trecenas to formulate a storyline in the order of them. It also follows them precisely by day in those Trecenas. Okay? With some minor changes. Genesis is the best preserved, but that's definitely, without a question, that's a thing. So you have the 20 days, the 36 decans, and the 20 Trecenas. Now, who has all this stuff? Who knows this stuff? Well, everybody does. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, at least in ancient times they did, because I find it popping up all over the place. I first saw this, the 20 days and the 20 Trecenas, in the Maya and the Aztec, but then soon found out that, whoa, all the North American tribes of people also had them. South America knows them. Then you find out Egypt had them. Then you find out the Chinese have them. Then the Japanese with Hokusei. I mean, and that's pretty recent, so this isn't buried knowledge. The Hindu definitely have it. The Europe, you find it in Europe, and you find it in the Mediterranean. So it's all over the place. Now with the 36 decans, also the same places, and maybe Australia. I don't know. I haven't really had a chance. I mean, I would feel much more comfortable if I was able to go down there. I wouldn't try to do that on the internet. I think I'd want to go down there. But in Australia, they have these 36 monoliths at this giant rock park, and they're very sacred, and they keep them, and there's a bunch of very bizarre factual information they're finding with the indigenous people of Australia having sacred knowledge, and then finding out that it correlates very scientifically. So I'm pretty well confident that Australia also had this knowledge. So that means it was all over the world. So it's not surprising to find it in a text. What's surprising is the people who distribute the text don't really say anything about it. You would think, with all the Bible study that's been done, an endless stream of analysis and endless streams of debate and study, and oh man, you got colleges, how much time are they spending? Nobody talks about this, but I can assure you that if you know the Trecenas and you know the days, you will see it immediately, because you're talking about key words and phrases and themes written in a numerical sequence. And I know they say, well, it wasn't originally numbered. I say, well, yeah, okay, that's the copy you found, but I'm willing to bet you that they were, and I'm willing to bet that the guy who numbered them, I think it was Langton for King James, I think that they definitely knew this stuff, or they were, wow, that would be, I can't even imagine trying to do that without knowing this stuff. You can also notice changes in these things. I didn't put Deuteronomy in here. Deuteronomy also follows the days by chapter. Doesn't follow the Trecenas. It follows the days by chapter. But Exodus follows the days perfectly by chapter, starting with Bots, goes around twice. 40 chapters. 20 days, twice. Okay? You can't change that. You will not be able to deny that. Mark follows the days by chapter, beginning with Keneal, which is the feminine aspect of, that's the feminine birthing aspect. It's the origin of the ovum, right? This is the female, it's the female aspect of reproduction in the 20 days, with T-Hawks being the male aspect. So they definitely intentionally started the chapters with Keneal and Mark. And then John follows the days by chapter beginning with Bots, and that's why it sounds a lot like Genesis. So the beginning of Genesis starts with Bots, and in the beginning was the Word, and all this. So it sounds very similar, follows a very similar progression, and that's why, because it follows the days by chapter beginning with Bots, and most certainly use Genesis as a reference. Numbers That's 36 chapters exactly, and it definitely follows the Decans by chapter, and it has definitely been messed with ad nauseum. I mean, it starts out kinda, it's very discernible, the bones are there. But by the end of it, it's just so annoying with the repetition and all the messing with it. But they didn't destroy it. They just messed it up. Like, I mean, boy, that book actually could be a very good book if it was cleaned up. Take out all the names, replace it with the proper, just be honest. Uh, Genesis follows the Trecenas by chapter, like I say, starting with Ish and 11 bots. The first verse is 11 bots, and then you follow it, and of course the would be the fourth verse is one Ish, and that establishes that chapter as one Ish. The next chapter would begin uh, one Kej, and so on and so forth. So they all begin on one, except the very first chapter, because they want to make sure they start on the right day, so it starts on bots. It also, now this is what makes Genesis, in my mind, the cleanest book in the entire Bible. Again, all you have to do is take out all the names or just be honest. But it also follows the Decans by chapter, starting with Aries 1, in perfect order, by the way. Even with the, I can get into more about the how you discern those orders. But they're very easy to follow, and they match accordingly. You will see the correlations once you follow those. You'll see the correlations between the books, and then you'll also see the correlations in symbology and descriptor. Very, very explicit descriptors from around the world. Ezekiel follows the Trecenas by chapter, starting with one Kej, and again, Kej is the day of the astrologers. It's the day of the four corners of the universe. It's the day of position. It's the day of. It's also a very spiritual day. So Kej is known for the clarity of the. It's an air day, so it's known as a day that does have a clarity with connecting with the invisible. Let's say. And it is usually the theme is unity, and definitely the wheels within the wheels is a big part of it. So that's chapter 1, and then it goes on to become one of the most annoying books in the Bible. But I mean, it's just so angry all the time. It's recognizable as a phase that people go through in a process of revelation. And that's what I call the angry phase, where they get very authoritative, like, "Oh, I am the most highest God, I order you to," it's a very human thing to go through that phase. I think there's probably a very high percentage of people that follow the path of the mystic or the spiritual, learning the spiritual arts. I think it's a very predictable phase that people go through, and that appears to be captured quite annoyingly in Ezekiel. But it does have, the bones are there, and the keywords are definitely there. It actually has some really good keyword correlations within the chapters, so that you can really discern the progression of the Trecenas quite nicely. But it's really hard to tune out all the anger ordering around and condemnation stuff. It's like, come on. It's kind of, so I call it amateur rewrite of what might have been, something profound. Matthew follows the Trecenas by chapter, starting with one Eek. Now, Eek is the cross. So Eek is symbolized by the cross, and that is the 12th day. And that's what Matthew goes by. That it starts with Eek and goes through the Trecenas like that. Luke follows the Trecenas, starting with Emosh, which is the day before Eek. So Luke starts in Emosh, and technically that's like the 10 days before the beginning of the Trecena of Ish if you started it on 11 bots. That might be a little confusing, but Luke is basically uh, following the Trecenas starting with the Moshe, and I could elaborate on those books, although they're kind of annoying, I have to say. They're not they're not as good as Genesis at all, and these things are rewritten, and it's obviously like a copycat kind of syncretization of a storyline to facilitate the obfuscation of the original knowledge by way of integrating it into, I don't know, some kind of monarchy. I guess that's, you know it's very it's it's annoying to correlate those books. It's not hard. So when you're doing things by the Trecenas, this isn't something that naturally occurs. Like I could examine you know, a text and say, well, it looks like it follows the days, and I could get a false positive doing it by the days. If there was a running theme with chapters, you could get a false positive because it's a natural progression. But Trecenas, no way. You're not going to get a false positive doing that. These things are extremely intentional, and it definitely shows a high level of understanding of the 260-day calendar. So there's no denying it. You can't get out of it. So that's just a little truth bomb I wanted to drop today. This is I think it's a crime. I really do. I think this is a crime because when you tell people a story and they say, "Wow, is that true?" and you say, "Yes." I mean, I think you accept a little responsibility there, particularly when you follow the question of, "Is it true?" and you say, "Yes," and then they say, "Well, what do I do?" and then you hold out your hand, and then they put money in it, and then they put their lives in it, and they follow you and your alleged immorality. I think you've really crossed the line with what I call pious fraud, and that's basically the same as any other fraud, snake oil, any of that. It's the same thing. And I'm not an atheist. I definitely am very aware of invisible intelligences that actively seek communication and whatever else with people. I've definitely tried to follow the path of the mystic. Spent most of my life on the road. I'm not an atheist by any means. I definitely feel that there is a ultimate intelligence and a hierarchy within those intelligences, I might add. But this no, this is nothing but an amateur cover up, and I think that's why they had to use so much violence to make sure this was taken in by all these countries. I also think that the destruction of the original calendars was part of this, because you had to have a two-pronged attack. First of all, you've got to get them to believe this story, but in order to do that, you have to destroy their calendar. And in its place, they put a confusing, nasty piece of work that has no meaning, and all it does is disorient people. So confusing the people with purpose is a crime. Defrauding the people is a crime. I would say they could do whatever they want, but if they start taking money, they've committed fraud. My opinion, that's just my opinion. I'm trying to understand the laws. I don't make them, but if I trick somebody and tell them that something is not true and they buy my product, I get sued for that. So I don't see any difference here. But there you go. There's a chunk of study. Thought I'd put it out there. Goes with the Trecenas. very noticeable, undeniable, and they don't talk about it. So let's hope we can get them to start talking about this. I'm not going to hold my breath. I think they're going to deny it, but they won't be able to for very long, because once you get a few serious scientists looking at this, or some serious scholars and analysts, it's going to become pretty obvious pretty quickly, because this isn't very difficult. It's not what I would consider to be difficult. And this isn't that anything like the crossword puzzles that people had. You know, like, oh, look at this. If you draw a diagonal line through the third page of this book, it spells God's going to get you. You know, no, there's none of that. This is tangible, in your face, comparable to multiple other cultures. The descriptors cannot be erased. The book cannot be erased. It's evidence just laying there, right there, just waiting to be discussed. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. Okay? Have a great day. Thanks.